Russia hits Dnipro and Kherson as pressure on Ukrainian troops intensifies.
Poland's Prime Minister urges people to vote in the EU elections, saying a united Europe is crucial to the country's security.
A new report warns there's a possibility famine has hit northern Gaza, although no formal declaration has been made.
US President Joe Biden has arrived in Paris ahead of commemorations for the 80th anniversary of D-Day. He's going to be joined by other world leaders in a series of events and ceremonies dedicated to the crucial Normandy landings of 1944, the largest amphibious operation in military history. Attendees will include the British royals as well as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Russian President Vladimir Putin wasn't invited. In France, Biden is expected to reassure Europe on America's commitments to the continent's security, amid fears that Donald Trump may waver US support if re-elected. Biden will also meet Zelensky to discuss how Washington can continue to support Kyiv in the war against Russia, as Ukraine currently buckles under the pressure of a new imminent incursion by Kremlin forces.
A new report has warned there's a possibility famine has hit northern Gaza, although no formal declaration can be made until more data is collected. Famine exists when 20% of households are essentially starving, at least 30% of children suffer wasting, and 2 adults or 4 children per every 10,000 are dying daily of hunger and its complications. But the report's authors, known as the Famine Early Warning Systems Network, say their ability to collect data has been impeded by the war and restrictions on humanitarian access. Israel has repeatedly denied there is famine underway in Gaza and rejected allegations it's used hunger as a weapon in its war against Hamas. A formal declaration could be used as evidence at the International Criminal Court, as well as at the International Court of Justice, where Israel faces allegations of genocide. The report also cautioned efforts to increase aid into Gaza are insufficient and urged Israel's government to act urgently. Much of Gaza's 2.3 million population has been displaced since the war began, and their health ministry claims more than 36,000 Palestinians have been killed. Israel's expanding offensive in Rafah has largely cut off the flow of food, medicine, and other supplies to Palestinians facing widespread hunger. In the south, thousands have returned to Khan Yunis, where basic infrastructure is lacking and people are struggling to get the minimum amounts of water to survive. Meanwhile, despite pressure from the United States on Israel and Hamas to accept its 3-phase ceasefire proposal, no agreement has yet been made.
Russia hit the city of Dnipro on Tuesday, a key front line between Russia and Ukrainian troops. Ukraine managed to shoot down 2 missiles, but debris injured 6 people, including a 1-month-old baby, and damaged homes. A school was also hit in another Russian strike. Down south, the Kremlin continued its shelling on Kherson. 16 settlements on the right bank of the region were under fire in the past 48 hours, and several houses were damaged following a strike on a residential neighborhood. Moscow's ground offensive in the north has opened a new front and put more pressure on Ukraine's forces in the south. The US and Germany recently authorized Kyiv to carry limited strikes on Russian territory, but it's still unclear how effective they will prove.
Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said that any French military instructors in Ukraine would be a legitimate target for Russian forces. Lavrov made his remarks in the Republic of Congo during a tour of Africa. Kyiv has said that it is in discussions with Paris to send French military staff to Ukraine to train troops, but French President Emmanuel Macron has declined to comment on the issue. Lavrov will visit several countries in his tour of the African continent.
Europe's ultra-conservative parties are being forced to seek out more moderate political allies in an attempt to secure enough votes to influence future EU legislation. According to the Euronews super polls, while the Conservatives are expected to see significant gains in the upcoming elections, they are still too divided to produce a viable EU Commission leader.
If we think about Giorgia Meloni, for example, the Italian Prime Minister, we have to understand that when we look at the leadership in the European right, we have also to see to take in account that we are talking about leaders that in some cases are also head of government, so they have different interests.
According to the Euronews Polls Centre's simulations, if the Conservatives decide to go into coalition, their best option would be to join up with the Liberals of the Renew Party. This way, they could match up parliamentary seat distribution with the realpolitik of the EU government. Coalition between the Conservative groups would be difficult, as it would be too weighted towards the right. There are also many issues the two main far-right parties, the European Conservatives and Reformists, led by Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, and the Identity and Democracy Party, led by France's Marine Le Pen, are not united on. At the moment, the only issue that can create some cohesion within the right is the struggle against immigration. But even then, solutions to the matter differ between the southern flank and the eastern and northern parts of the EU.
But the center of gravity will certainly move to the right. And this is something the EPP, which will then be the central player, will be able to use as a blackmail potential vis-à-vis the Liberals and the Social Democrats, if not the Greens. I don't believe that the EPP is serious about working with identity and a democracy. That would also be political suicide at the national level, but they will certainly use it.
According to the Euronews Polls Centre, Europe's mainstream political parties are likely to face the difficult task of creating a ruling parliament using votes from the fragmented radical right bloc.
Addressing thousands of supporters in Warsaw on Tuesday, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk urged people to vote in this weekend's European elections. He said the polls were crucial to the country's security as it faces increased tensions on its eastern border. Tusk said a united Europe was the only way to avoid war in Poland.
Słuchajcie, uwierzcie mi, tam na Kremlu dla nich ewentualne polityczne zdobycie Brukseli byłoby ważniejsze niż zdobycie Charkowa. Ten bój o to, kto będzie rządził w Polsce, a teraz bój o to, kto będzie rządził w Europie. To jest także bój o to, aby wojna nie wkroczyła w nasze granice.
The rally, at which people waved both Polish and EU flags, marked the 35th anniversary of the 1989 elections, which brought an end to communist rule.
Że ja się bardzo martwię o wynik tych wyborów. Ja osobiście bardzo chciałabym być z Europą i nie wyobrażam sobie innej przyszłości.
Last month, Tusk said Poland was investing over €2 billion to enhance security along its border with Russia and Belarus. The EU vote in Poland takes place on Sunday. While European institutions are urging people to go out and vote, for many living on the street, this is not possible. A European group of organisations working with the homeless, Fianza, says some 900,000 people are living rough or in temporary accommodation. Most of them are EU citizens, many of whom are barred from voting for administrative reasons.
You need to have a permanent address where you are registered so that you can vote. So if homeless people live in temporary accommodation, or they live in shelters or in the street, it is difficult for them to register in a permanent address.
And it's not only people living on the streets, but also those in complicated housing situations, people without their own homes. In Brussels, they gather at the citizens' lobby, the Syndicat des Immenses, to offer one another help. One of them says she'd like to vote in the European elections, but can't.
J'ai pas d'adresse, donc parce que j'ai perdu mon logement et en plus j'ai même plus de carte d'identité parce qu'on m'a volé mes papiers. Et donc, je n'existe pas en tant que citoyenne de mon propre pays, parce que moi je suis belge. Donc si on n'existe pas au point de vue administratif, on ne peut pas voter.
In theory, they could get a reference address at a foster home, but the process is often long and complicated, as another person explains.
Je n'ai pas reçu ma convocation pour aller voter et je ne peux pas retourner à l'adresse, cette adresse administrative officielle que j'ai encore. C'est ma adresse de référence parce qu'on ne me laisse plus entrer dans le bâtiment. C'est une maison de repos et un tour et taxi. Et on m'a mis dehors avec la police.
In addition, for people who are facing hardship, voting is often low on the list of priorities in comparison to more urgent needs.
Le résultat des élections, l'impact du résultat de mon vote sur ma situation, c'est infiniment lointain. Et quand vous êtes dans l'urgence, dans la survie, c'est des choses qui passent pas du tout dans vos priorités. C'est mon intuition.
The European Parliament has been asked to revise the need for a proof of address as a condition in order to vote. But for these elections, it's too late.